Hello everyone. As requested, I'm making this video to demonstrate how to implement multiplayer into the Unity Karting Microgame. The first thing I'm going to do is start up Unity Hub. Then I'm going to make a new project. I'll use the Karting Microgame. Just give it a new name. Just call it New Kart. And then create. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to download the mirror networking framework from the Unity Asset Store. So we'll click on the Asset Store tab. Search for mirror networking. And we will get this one. Just import that in. So after importing that in, we should see mirror in our assets. So that shows that it's all imported okay. I'm going to go back to the scene view. And now I'm going to create a new folder at the base of my assets, and I'm going to call it my prefabs. And I'll show you why soon. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my scene. I'm going to create a new empty game object called Network Manager. And I'm going to add the component Network Manager. I'm going to then add another component called Network Manager HUD. I'm not going to change this one at all. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to create the spawn points. For this tutorial I'm just going to make 2, but you can add as many as you want. I'm going to go to where the Kart Classic player is. I'm going to copy the position, so I need to right click on transform and click copy component. Then I'm going to create a new empty game object. I'm going to call it spawn1. Paste the component values. So it's exactly where the player currently is. I'm going to shift it a little bit to his left. Then I'm going to add 2 components to it. The first one is the network start position, and that is the spawn point. And then the next component will be the network identity. So everything I've found in Mirror so far needs to have this network identity, otherwise Mirror just doesn't know how to deal with it. So the next thing I need to do is I need to duplicate it. I'll rename this to spawn2 just to remove confusion. I'm going to shift it to the right, and now I'm going to convert these both into prefabs. So we're going to open up that my prefabs folder we made before, and I'm going to drag them both in here. Now that we've made those 2 spawn point prefabs, we can go back into the network manager and we can open up the network manager component, and then we can drag and drop this 2 spawn points in once we've created the these little placeholders. So I'm going to drag in number 1 and number 2. Another small detail that I forgot to mention earlier was that in the network manager you need to change the spawn points from random to round robin. Otherwise you'll find that sometimes the players will spawn inside each other, and that's not going to work either. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add network support to the player. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the Kart Classic player, and we're going to edit the prefab by clicking this little arrow. Then we're going to add 3 more network components. The first one is network identity. The next one is network transform, which will help track the position. The last one will be the network rigid body. Now, 2 important things you need to do is you need to tick the client authority on the network transform and on the network rigid body. Otherwise, things misbehave a bit later on. So what we can do now is we can exit the prefab by saving it. Now what we want to do is we want to go back to our network manager and we want to assign this as the player prefab. However, you do not want to drag this in. I discovered that that causes a problem later on. What we want to do is we want to find this in our Explorer here. So we'll just search for Kart Classic. That's it there. And we want to drag that into the network manager. So we'll bring that in. And the last thing that's really important as well is we need to delete this from the scene. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to disable the in-game music because it becomes very distracting when trying to record. So I'm just going to click on the background music game object and untick audio source, and that should sort that out. Now that we've done all that, we should be able to do a test to see how it's looking. So what we'll do is we'll click on File, Build Settings, click on Build, create a new folder called Compiled, click Select. And the reason we do this is because you can't run two instances of the game inside the Unity editor. You need to run one that's separated in, a compiled state. Now we're going to launch that. Now we're going to launch the game inside the editor. I'm going to host the server from here. And I'm going to run the client from here. So this is how it behaves. You can see that it seems to run okay, except you'll notice that driving one player seems to affect both of them, which is really not what we want. It seems to try to correct itself, but this is still not ideal. It's a bit glitchy. And then the other big problem is that the camera's not following the player either. So this is just not going to work. Now, to get the multiplayer working properly for the player, we need to hack apart what was included in the karting microgame. So what we'll do is we're going to search for the player. So we're going to go back to Assets, search for Player. Going to double click on it to edit the prefab. Now what we're going to do is we're going to find the script called KeyboardInput, and I'm going to edit that. So I'll right click and click Edit. Now normally when you implement multiplayer using Mirror, what you'd normally do is you type in using Mirror at the top, and that would normally import the namespace, and then what you would then do is you would change something in here called mono behavior, and then you would change that to network behavior, which for this, because this is using BaseInput, it's actually in here. So we'd normally do it here. And also the using mirror up here. But you can see that it's not finding it. It's out of scope. And so if we save this, it's just not going to work. So to be able to work out where this is in context to, we need to trace it back to its roots. So because this is using the KartGame namespace, we're going to trace that. So the way I found it, so I went back into the Explorer and searched for KartGame. Then I found 4 of these ASMDEF files, which are according to Google, they're assembly definition files which the original developer used to organize his scripts into assemblies. So for each of these, if you double click on any of them, you'll see this, which if you have a close look over at the inspector, it's the same as that. It's just the flat file, so that's not really interesting to us. What we want to do though is for each of these four, what I did was I referenced the mirror library. So I just clicked on the button and typed in mirror, double clicked on it, and then if you just click out of the inspector and click apply, that'll go ahead and commit that change. Now it does take a while for each one, so you just need to be patient. Now that we've done that, we should be able to go back to the keyboard input script and we should be able to fix that up. So we're going to go back into Visual Studio and you'll see that that's already working now. So we're able to put in using mirror to implement that namespace. We're able to use the network behavior class, and then keyboard inputs also letting us use mirror, and that's really good. Now the way that this has been done is a bit unusual for me. However, the way I worked out how to do this without reinventing the wheel is by basically creating two floats. So I'm going to create a float xVal and a float yVal. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an update block. In there, I'm going to basically assign the Input.GetAxis for horizontal into the xVal, and then with the yVal, I'm going to do that with the vertical input. And then what I'll do is I'll assign this up here. Whoops, took that comma out, didn't want to do that. The other thing I need to do in this update block is I need to put an if statement. So basically I want to make it so if this is the local player, then I want to grab this input, because otherwise what it's going to be doing is for every single player that's inside the scene, including players from multiple clients, it's going to run the code, which is not what we want. We want it to only get this input if it's the local player. So that's how we do that, and I'm going to save that again. Now after doing this, we've made some pretty big changes to the way the input works, so I'm just going to make sure it still works. So I'm going to go back into the editor and press play. And I'll run the server, just make sure we can still drive it with it not behaving weirdly. It seems to work okay. The other thing we can do is we can also test two-player and make sure that they're both working independently. So I'm going to go File, Build and Run, which is just a shortcut to build settings. Now I'm going to run the editor as well. Post the server from the editor. We'll run the client on here. And look at that. That's looking much better. Won't be able to see it on the other end, but you'll have to take my word for it that it's behaving correctly. That's exactly what we want. However, obviously the camera's still not following, and that's the next thing we're going to fix. So the way that this works is It's also not something I'm comfortable with or familiar with. They implemented this Cinemachine virtual camera, and it'll basically follow and look at the transform for the player, which is broken because I deleted it before, but that's just has to be that way. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it a script so that runs on the player itself. So when it spawns in, it's going to go ahead and update this virtual camera to the transform of the player itself. And we're going to make it run for only the local player so it doesn't go and follow the other player from the other side. Now I'll just show you how it works now, just so you can see. So what we'll be doing is we'll be getting this virtual camera and we'll be dumping this kart player in, but we'll be doing this programmatically. So that'll just happen automatically. So to understand how this Cinemachine virtual camera works, what we're going to do is we're going to edit this script, because we need to work out how we can modify this follow and this look at transform. I'm going to right click and click to edit script. So the first thing we notice is that it's using a namespace called Cinemachine. And the next thing we notice is this is the class that's going to be useful later on. And then if we keep going down, we can see the lookat. That's the public lookat, which is there. And the other thing we want is the follow, which is there. So we should be able to get this game object, and then we'll be able to get the components, and these we can modify these as well. Now to be able to find this later, what we're going to do is we're going to tag this. I just use the main camera because I found that the actual camera itself doesn't use it, so it's not like it's going to get confused at all. That should be pretty safe. So to make this new script, we're going to open back up the player prefab. I'm just going to search for it, double click on it, and at the base of it, we're going to make a new script. I'm going to call it camera follow player and edit that once it's been created. Just click right click, click edit script. So the way this is going to work is we're going to get rid of this update block because we don't need it. We only want this to run once. We're going to implement mirror, then change this to network behavior, and then we're going to make it so if this is local player, then we want to go and find that camera on the scene. So we do this by going game object dot find game object with tag, open bracket, main camera. It's really important you get the case correct or it's not going to work. And then we want to do a dot get component, and then this is where we use that namespace we looked at before, so that's Cinemachine, and then dot the class, which is Cinemachine virtual camera. This bit I always forget is to do the open and close brackets, and then do a dot follow so we can modify that value. And what we want it to follow is the player, and because we've put it on the root of our prefab, all we have to do to reference that is just type in game object dot transform. Whoops, I didn't like it. GameObject.transform. And now we just need to modify the look at. So we can just copy and paste that because it's going to be the same except for this. Look at. And that should be that finished. Now if all's gone well, we should be able to test it, and fingers crossed it should be working. So let's just compile it. Now I'm going to move this so you can actually see both of them at the same time. Just play on this one. Do the host server and client on here. See the cameras following, which is great. Just play on the other one. Pick up client, and look at that. Working exactly how I wanted it to, which is really good. Well, that's everything done. Now, I should point out that a lot of the things are still broken, like, you know, the game has no way of knowing who's in first place at the moment, and there's the laps are broken. There's so many things that are broken. All we've really done here is we've just made it so it's got two people driving around, and even though their position is synchronized, the games are pretty independent. So yeah, there's definitely a lot more work that needs to be done. I may or may not share what I've been working on by myself, but this is just to show everyone who is interested. Thank you for watching. Bye.